After being stuck in a void like Gaster and a million Deltarune tomorrows, we finally got news on when Deltarune Chapter 3 and 4 would come out. And in my opinion, now is the perfect time to make theories, just so we can be wrong when it comes out. But one thing I thought about was Mystic Slime's video about how either Noelle or Ralsei will be one that we choose between. This came to my mind because I thought of an alternative, or rather, an add-on to it. For starters, let's talk about Ralsei in general. When you think of Ralsei, what do you think of? Fluffy prince, pacifist, or, if you had your daily dose of brain rot, you'd think Ralsei is gonna turn evil and have some oh-so-glorious reveal to be some evil mastermind and end up being the final boss or something like that. Well, for you people who don't think he's evil, you're gonna love this video. Maybe. Basically, by the end of this video, you're gonna have a whole nother perspective on Ralsei. He won't be a skeleton with a flash of patient justice, but he might have a similar role. Anyway, starting off with basics on theories, Ralsei is of course known for his extended knowledge of the prophecy and the dark world, and even some of the light world, like the classroom and objects. This already separates him from most characters that don't know as far as that. He's also known for stuff like the battle system, sparing darkners, and some fourth wall breaks that we probably go crazy about, while Toby is just trying to find, a way to use the most friendly character to tell us basic tutorial knowledge on how to save. But it's not a stretch to say he knows all that. But let's move on to another characteristic he has, and that is informing us where we make mistakes. Certain things characters do, like attacking darkners or opening fountains, causes Ralsei to tell us that it's wrong and we should avoid such things. Why is this so important? Well, it's clear Ralsei has high respect and even serves the Lightners, as he believes all darkners should. Yet, he still has enough confidence to tell them where they're wrong, and even tells us while he is at a, shy point in his personality. This means it's very important to him at a rate. Another characteristic I've seen theorists mention is patience. Whether it's ignorant or intentional patience, he waits till what basically is the very last second to tell us something crucial. This is seen with Birdly literally almost causing the roaring, which would have been the end of the world. I'm also sure he waits almost too long to tell us other things, but I forget, honestly. If you guys remember any of those moments besides the roaring, let me know in the comments. Anyway, remember that last characteristic because it'll come up later. Let's talk about his relation to the player and Kris. I believe Ralsei wants to be friends with Kris and not just us, although he seems to understand we are separate beings. At times he seems to be talking to us, and at other times he talks to Kris. But the most interesting of all is when he, what seems to be intentionally steers away from our view so we can communicate with Kris. Why would that be important? Well, that'd be the perfect time for Kris to talk about their possession and how they feel about it. I honestly think Ralsei would listen to Kris as he is shown to do it again in Chapter 2. And I doubt he'd do it again if the first time of steering away the screen didn't go over well with Kris. Now, adding on the Mystic Slime's video, I want to say I think Ralsei and Noelle with the pick one later on will be heavily important to each route, and it's gonna make sense. First of all, Noelle resembles an angelic-like form, and that's comparable to the angel's heaven. The very thing we want to not let happen in the game since it's the roaring, right? Meanwhile, for Ralsei, he seems to want to seal the fountains and prevent the roaring. Although at the end of Snowgrave, Kris does seal the fountain, it still makes us think about the damage done to Darkners, which Ralsei would care about, assuming that's why he gathers them into his central town. Now on to the interesting part. The Thorn Ring is a device we use to hurt Noelle into complying with our will. The most interesting part of it? Susie and Ralsei aren't in the dark when it comes to it. Susie labels it as a torture device and seems to be confused, while Ralsei straight up just is silent and observant. He won't even dare to make a comment on it. Why? He knows a lot about the way things work in Deltarune. It is not a stretch to say he knows everything about what that device is and how it works, to the point that he doesn't even need to question you about it. I believe if Susie finds out, you already know how it's gonna end. If she found out about the Thorn Ring and the way you use it on Noelle, you'd have your face bit off. While I think Ralsei already knows how it was used, he doesn't even question about it. In a weird route sense, it's nothing weird about it to think Susie would attack you the second she finds out how you used it. I believe in the twisted versions of the routes in the future, she'll take on Undyne the Undying role with a ton of anger and confusion. She isn't patient like Ralsei, and would definitely beat the heck out of us just for it. Although, I believe such a battle would end with her finally being used as a tool to kill Darkness under our control, or just straight up killed. Kris wouldn't be on board with this decision, but since when was Kris in control? Now onto the very, very interesting stuff. Ralsei seems to be this weak healer, but think about it for a second. Who else is a GOAT in a familiar game who has healing powers and some lethal ones? Well, if you said Toriel, you'd be correct. Toriel has fire powers and heals you twice in Undertale. I believe Ralsei is just only using his healing powers as he believes in being a pacifist. Am I implying Ralsei has fire powers? Definitely. Look at the legend picture. He's literally surrounded by fireballs. Another thing is that if Ralsei is patient like earlier, it'd be no stretch to think that he'd wait throughout the entire game, even distancing himself if necessary, hoping you change your mind. He'd probably stay close to communicate with Kris, but it's hard to say because I believe on the weird route Noelle would be used to kill Darkners, and eventually Ralsei would find out or watch us kill them live while begging us to stop, or would just become non-calent and then would just leave us to our own thing while warning us about the threat to the prophecy this would have. Ultimately, I believe Ralsei would be out of the party by the time the Susie fight would happen, or perhaps the fight would be the snapping point for Ralsei, as a member of the prophecy has just been attacked or even worse. Now, Deltarune was mentioned in the new trailer as Undertale's parallel story. This would probably mean that it has multiple parallels, and I think it does. I believe one of them is Ralsei having Sans' role. I mean, think about our old buddy pal Sans. He's a patient, kind, supportive pacifist guy, and ultimately just wants to have a great time, and maybe convince you to be content and stay on a nice ending. By pacifist, I don't mean that he doesn't have the capacity to attack anyone. I just mean that he supports the whole idea of being a pacifist. He literally wants us to be content and stay on the nice ending without ruining it. He waits until the end of the game to reveal what XP and love actually are, with most judgments ending up like, "Wow, you suck. You should probably change that. Although, you're not a terrible person either, unless you killed Papyrus. Still dodging you though." And he has a great sense of it in-depth game knowledge and has some extremely overpowered abilities. He only stops you if you go out of your way to try to end the entire world. I feel like Ralsei would step in since Deltarune's world as a whole world would be threatened with the Roaring. Ralsei cares about other Darkners and likely all Lightners, but I don't think he'd let his superstar favorite Lightner kill every other Lightner and Darkner by ending the entire world. Kris opens a fountain at the end of Chapter 2, and I think the weird route would cause us to open more and more fountains to cause the Roaring. While I feel Kris would start plotting alongside Ralsei during those off-screen talks about finding a way to free Kris, I feel like Ralsei has sympathy for Kris, and especially for the possessive reason. This would also go hand in hand with the vessel theory, since we might have to fight both Kris and Ralsei at the end of the game using the vessel. Ultimately, Deltarune might only have one ending, but that does not mean that the boss fights can't be switched up or the ending ever so slightly different or affected, right? A scene in this scenario that would definitely go hard and be stone cold is Ralsei being fed up with you and distancing himself to the point that he puts on his hat again and shadows himself. This would be a physical representation of how he feels clouded before a greater power that is built entirely of destruction and carelessness. Ralsei is a very caring character, and I feel that that would affect him on a great scale. Sans canonically wears his hood on the genocide route when he is watching you during the route. This is observed through the Shyren fight. It usually says Sans is selling tickets made of toilet paper, but in Genocide, it says a hooded figure watches from afar, which is definitely most Sans. I mean, the hooded figure line is literally in the same exact turn as the line that talks about Sans selling tickets made of toilet paper, so it's not much of a stretch to say it is Sans. The hood transition in itself isn't trying to be edgy, it's putting a difference, a clear symbol of the consequences of your actions on said character. On true pacifists, Sans would become truly happy again, assuming you don't reset, and would stay as an open funny guy. In Genocide, he doesn't really have anyone to talk to once he pries his bro away, as well as anyone else in Snowden. I could be overthinking it, but I'd say it's the perfect sign of an uncontrollable entity towering over and shadowing a helpless character who can't do anything about it. And all they can do is just watch. Which is why I think in this supposed weird route, Ralsei would have his hat again and would be highly secluded until he eventually leaves us with Noelle, as we made our choice long ago. We'd make the Twisted Sword once Noelle is of no use, and we'd continue to open fountains and slaughter all the darkness we see, until we are eventually about to open the last fountain to start the roaring. I feel like an insane plot twist is Ralsei confronts us in the light world. We'd be vulnerable, less powerful, and it'd shock everyone. Ralsei could do this. I mean, he knows how the light world looks to a certain extent, and has such willpower as a darkener from a pure fountain that he can survive in other dark worlds. He might even be able to be in the light world in his dark world form, although I think he'd still have the greater chance of fighting us in an empty town that was supposed to be filled with life and laughter, but is left as it always was, lonely and, well, dark. One of the best character developments I have for this theory is after Susie sacrifices herself, Ralsei would snap and leave us taking a page out of Susie's book. He'd begin to rebel against us and eventually completely despise us and our controlling nature. It'd become no shock to why he'd want to even dare to go against us and refuse to let us control him or end the world. I mean, think about it. In the normal route, Susie becomes more friendly and tolerable like Ralsei. In the weird route, Ralsei becomes more like Susie. It's a perfect parallel. One thing I think would happen is since we level up Noelle and Snowgrave, we'd have to use Noelle to kill Darkners, and eventually get our vessel and use the Twisted Sword to level up our vessel into an extremely powerful tool. As I theorized before, I think Kris would fight for freedom alongside Ralsei, who is fighting to help Kris and forcefully turn her route around to one that's better, where we do the right thing and have the best fun experience and eventually leave Kris alone. Think about that. It could be a parallel to Undertale. Ralsei would be like Flowey in knowing that if we win, we'd be content as we beat the game and got the true ending. Maybe this is what he tells Kris when they're alone. If he keeps letting us take control and get that complete feeling when we win the game, we'll put down the game and eventually leave Kris alone to have control again. I also believe this is why, right after Spam to Neo, he talks to Kris, and also why he tries to comfort Kris, and also doesn't let Susie find out about why Kris is stressing. I mean, if Susie finds out about the possession and all that, she'd be much more aggressive compared to Ralsei, who's much more wise and takes a clever approach. Ralsei is trying to deceive us into getting a good ending and then just leaving us be, hence why he comforts Kris there, because then Kris would realize that, and he would let us take control and get the ending we want. As for the weird route, Ralsei wouldn't want us to put down the game on a horrible ending and leave them there to suffer forever or just be straight up dead. Even if there's only one ending, it could have different exclusive things to it. As for the battle itself and how they would stand a chance, I believe Ralsei would heal himself and Kris, as well as use his magic to make the fluffy guard orbs to prevent being one-shotted. Of course, he'd also use fire and do great deals of damage alongside a leveled up Kris due to the fountains we sealed in the past before our opening fountain rampage. We'd get an insane banger final boss theme, a heart-wrenching plot, sad but tough character development, as well as a hard final battle. Possibly would have an enraged Ralsei phase if you somehow ended up killing Kris before him, or maybe Kris would survive and you'd have to fight yourself. Anyway, that's as much ideas as I had today, and I didn't ever think I'd make an actual theory on this, but here we are. I just feel like everyone else thinks Ralsei is evil, but they forget that he has great potential to be a bigger character in stopping us to prevent the roaring, rather than being this evil liar. I mean, Ralsei is persuasive, and he can use that attribute to make us reconsider getting on the wrong route, rather than using it to manipulate us. Even then, manipulation isn't always a bad thing. Ralsei could use it for good, like manipulating us into not going on a killing rampage to find something new. I seem to be trailing off again, so I'll leave those ideas up to you guys to take away and maybe make bigger theories on in the future. Also, let me know what you think in the comments, as well as how Ralsei could be related to mysterious characters in Deltarune, and how that could tie in with this theory. I'll see you guys later, and I hope you think about this perspective of Ralsei's character.